Welcome back. In the first part of this explainer, we looked at the physical mechanics of actually washing this multi-million-dollar engine. Today, we're jumping right back into the action. We're going to break down the exact, unforgiving physical limits that keep this massive machine safe, and we'll look at the automated detection systems standing guard over the entire enclosure. Let's get right into it.
So, picking up where we left off, remember we established two very specific ways to wash this turbine. You've got your online wash, which is that quick, routine clean you do while the turbine is actually running and pushing out power. Then you've got the offline crank soak wash. Now that is a much deeper, heavy-duty chemical clean, and it means the engine has to be completely shut down. Today, we really need to zoom in on the offline wash, specifically an absolute hardline temperature limit you can never, ever cross when starting it. Because if you get this wrong, you don't just get a bad wash, you literally destroy the machine. Here is the golden rule you have to memorize. You can only start an offline chemical wash after you verify the outer casing has cooled below 200 degrees Fahrenheit or right around 93 degrees Celsius. And I mean genuinely verifying it with your instruments. You absolutely cannot just guess by feeling the heat radiating inside the enclosure. You have to watch those numbers and wait for the casing to drop below that strict threshold before a single drop of wash solution goes anywhere near that intake. Now, why is that 200-degree mark such an absolute law? Well, if you go in and spray cold or even ambient temperature wash solution onto incredibly hot turbine metal, you're going to trigger a violent physical reaction. It's called thermal shock. This happens when a really sudden, uneven temperature change forces the metal to rapidly contract in one tiny localized spot, while all the surrounding material stays expanded. It causes permanent warping or even cracking in materials that would have been totally fine if you just gave them the time to cool down gradually. Think about it like this. We've all seen what happens when you pull a scorching hot glass baking dish right out of the oven and immediately drop it into a sink full of cold water, right? It shatters instantly. It is the exact same physics at play here inside the turbine. Just like breaking that hot glass dish, the extreme rapid temperature change of hitting a hot turbine casing with cold water will instantly warp the metal. You might be thinking, come on, a massive steel casing is way tougher than a glass dish. And sure it is, but the tolerances inside a gas turbine are unbelievably tight. If you warp that casing even a fraction of a single millimeter, those high-speed compressor blades are going to literally grind against the metal the next time you spin the engine up. We are talking instantaneous, catastrophic blade rubs. You would effectively destroy the internal aerodynamics and the core mechanics of the entire machine the very next time you hit start. So, knowing all that, you might be asking, why even risk washing it at all? Well, you can't just skip it. If you're operating in a harsh offshore environment or really dusty industrial zone, this engine is sucking in dirt, salt, and soot every single day. All that junk creates a fouling buildup on the blades, and that buildup constantly eats away at your power output and your fuel efficiency. We're talking about a highly measurable drop in performance over just a few weeks. Washing isn't a luxury, it's a routine, absolute operational necessity. You just have to follow those thermal rules to do it safely. Okay, moving on to the two-tier gas detection system. Remember, this turbine isn't just sitting out in a breezy open field. It's locked inside a sealed acoustic and thermal enclosure. That turns it into a highly hazardous space, totally susceptible to extreme heat and dangerous fuel leaks. And that is exactly why the entire space is continuously monitored by a super sophisticated, automated safety web. What's really fascinating here is how the system's automated response escalates drastically based on the threat level. It measures something called the lower explosive limit, or LEL, of combustible gases. If it hits a low alarm, say around 10% LEL, the system triggers warning horns and spins up backup ventilation to try and blow out what's probably a minor leak. But look at the high alarm. If it hits 50% LEL, it stops messing around. It doesn't just vent harder. It executes a full-blown emergency trip. It immediately shuts the turbine down, completely isolates the fuel supply, and intentionally turns all the ventilation completely off. Let's think about that last detail for a second. At the 50% high alarm, the system intentionally shuts down the ventilation. Why on earth would you stop venting the room when you have a massive gas leak? Because at 50% LEL, you are dangerously close to an actual explosion. By shutting off the fans, the system chokes off the oxygen supply. It starves any potential fire of fresh air. Basically, it seals the box tight, getting ready for the automated fire suppression system, like massive tanks of CO2, to flood the enclosure, making sure all that life-saving suppression gas doesn't just get blown right out the exhaust vents. All right, let's put you in the hot seat for a minute. Imagine you're the field engineer on site. You're under massive pressure from plant management to get this thing back online. Because every hour this turbine is down, the company is bleeding thousands of dollars. The engine is shut down, you're queued up for a crank soak wash, but you look at the casing thermometer and it reads 250 degrees Fahrenheit. The crew is yelling to start the wash right now so everyone can go home. What's your call?
You have to hold off, period. The threshold is 200 degrees. If you cave to the pressure and break that thermal shock rule just to save a couple of hours, you are practically guaranteeing a catastrophic blade rub. It's a classic engineering rule. A delayed wash costs you time, but a warped casing costs you the entire engine. As a field engineer, your ultimate job is to defend the actual physics of the machine, even when the operational schedule is screaming at you to hurry up.
So, with those hard rules locked in, we've officially covered the physics and the hidden hazards of every core system running inside this multi-million-dollar enclosure. We've tackled the dual oil circuits protecting the bearings, the insane hydraulic forces needed just to start it, the delicate balance of the dual fuel system, and now the critical thermal limits and gas detection logic that stop the whole thing from destroying itself. You now have a complete picture of exactly how this giant breathes, spins, and protects itself.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty massive question. We've spent this whole explainer breaking down the razor-thin margins of safety that keep this machine alive. But how does a delicate 30-ton behemoth like this even get installed in the very beginning? Next time, we're going to look at exactly how you rig, lift, and perfectly level this massive package onto a concrete foundation before it ever turns a single revolution. Until then, just remember, brilliant engineering isn't just about making things run. It's about predicting exactly how they'll fail. So what critical systems are keeping your daily operations from hitting a catastrophic limit?